Ghana's history and identity by exploring the criminal justice system that existed long before colonial rule, long before modern institutions like the Ghana Police Service and the formal courts. Traditional authorities upheld law and order through customs, communal values, and indigenous legal practices. On this program, we take a look at how crimes were defined, how justice was administered, the nature of punishments, and the lessons that today's justice system can learn from our past. Stay with us as we uncover the foundations of justice in colonial Ghana. The show is brought to you by Campus Mineral Water. Pure, refreshing, simply the best. And if you want to support the Think Prisons 360 Degrees initiative, kindly donate as low as 1 Ghana cedi every month to the short code *972*1*3100#. And if you want to do business or collaborate with the Ghana Prison Service, kindly call on the Prison Industry and Business Limited, PRIMBAS, at the prison's headquarters, and we'll be glad and happy to do business with you. Today on my show, to help us with the insightful conversation, is a renowned historian with decades of experience. He is Reverend Dr. Daniel Kisi Ankra, senior lecturer, historian, and an anthropologist with the Bradford University in California, USA. He is also currently the administrator for the Bobugulomo, who is the spiritual overlord of the Ghanaian people. You are welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you.
I like your office. Entering your edifice, I like the inscription that I saw on the wall.
Sure. Nice.
Today on the Heritage Show, I hope you are going to educate our viewers, our listeners. We've yearned to have you on this show as Ghana is celebrating the Heritage Month. So we'll have our discussion, which I'm sure along the way, messages so we can people want to ask questions, others want to take your number for some conversations later. So we'll begin.
Okay.
What were the core objectives of the colonial criminal justice system in the Gold Coast? And how did these objectives align with the British imperial interest?
Sure. Now, looking at the criminal justice system, one first has to bear in mind how we got our name.
The name Ghana.
I'm talking about how we got our name when the colonialists were in the system. Our name wasn't Gold Coast. The name Gold Coast, that was planted on the soil today we call Ghana, was a name brought by Europeans. They weren't known by the name Gold Coast. So you could see that it was something that was forced on the people to accept. That is number one. Number two, before the Europeans arrived on the soil on which we live, which we claim to be ours, we were having means of handling things that today are described as criminal. We have our means of handling them. And before the Europeans came, we were having leaders who sometimes would be described as rulers. So we have states, and then we have kingdoms on this very land on which we live. The European came and brought the Bible to us and told us the Bible is full of things that could be classified as the likings of God the Father Almighty. But they presented the Bible to us with their left hand.
Please take that again. They presented the Bible.
Yes, the Europeans that came, they presented the Bible. If this were to be a Bible, they presented the Bible with their left hand, but behind them, they were holding a water. And so they told us in the Bible that we should accept it, and that if we obey what is in the Bible, God is going to take us to heaven. Just as we accepted the Bible Then they brought their weapon onto us. We didn't know what they were holding because we weren't using those weapons. Those weren't things that we were using. But they fire and they kill. They fire, they can maim you. They fire and they can render you totally useless. So these were some of the things that they brought in. And again, they made us to understand that when you handle the weapon, you can easily overcome your enemy. So they sold weapons to people who were once living in unity and in peace. Then they went behind them and would tell the first group, your friend is preparing to attack you. Already they've sold the guns to you and have sold to this very weapon. So before we realized, we were fighting among each other. Okay? So such were some of the means by which they were able to coerce our people to run into conflicts among ourselves. So later, they weren't even selling to us. But if you are able to conquer your enemy, that was the rule of the ancient times that we came to, know. If you conquer your enemy, you seize the women first, you chase after the men, and then you take their townships unto yourself. So seizing the women after a war, the women become your property. Oh, they become your property. And if you chase the men and you seize them, they become those that we claim to be slaves. And then the townships that they were once living, if you take it, you add that up to your state or to your town. And so if you can be able to seize people and take their lands, we developed what we call expansionist program. Because if I conquer you, I expand to take your land. If I conquer you, I grab your women. If I conquer you, I take your men. And the Europeans devised means that if you are able to get men that we feel they are strong, bring them to us. We will buy. That was how it all started. Looking at how you can attack, grab, and then sell, it is criminal. But to the Europeans, it was a way of life. They never made us to understand that buying and selling human beings is a criminal thing. They were involved. If you enter into such situation and you can grab and sell, when the tide turns against you, they will catch you and even sell you, or they will catch you. And then if there was nothing like jail, but they will catch you and then put you somewhere.
As in safe custody.
In a safe custody.
Confined.
Then he will be confined. But who introduced this kind of living standards? It was the European. They found problems with the Africans. But they who introduced it, and they were practicing it, they never saw themselves as criminals in this very act. So you could see that they started by coercing us. But when it comes to what they did before we were taken as people that have gone against the rules, they saw themselves not to be touched. So the whole system, as we are sitting down today to look at, the European was not under any law. In the name they gave to us as Gold Coast, no law could catch them. Since no law could catch them, they were free in everything. Then it got to a point, after seeing that we also have ways and means of handling issues or cases, they told us or made us to understand that our system, which was I call it system of the ruling leaders of the land. They told us that the way we handle cases we term as criminal, they said ours was bad. And so we should follow ours. But before the Europeans arrived, The leaders we have police, the local police. Not like their ways, not like their days. But we have our means of arresting situations, getting people that have done wrongs against society. And then we have a way of sitting them down, judging them, and we devised punishments for wrongdoers in the society. But it made us to understand that all these were bad. Then came serious or severe cases that demands that wrongdoers should be, okay, their lives must be taken away from them. We had that form of system too. So they based upon that because something happened in the late 1600s in a town called Windy Bay. Windy Bay. Windy Bay. The British were then having a fort in that very place. Windy Bay. Windy Bay has been corrupted to be Winneba.
But still has something for the Windy Bay Lodge or the Windy.
Oh, these are recent things. They are dynasty things.
Windy Bay.
Windy Bay.
Winneba.
Yes, current day Winneba. But the township was known as Simba. Yes. There was a British government in the fort then. Something happened. And the local people entrusted their children into the hands of the British to keep for them. They were going to fight. When they come back, they would come and take their properties. They went to fight, they came back collecting their properties. The Europeans said, the one that was entrusted with those children wasn't around. Look at such a situation. When you, the governor, and your people, you knew that the people's children were with you. So the people revolted against them. They messed themselves. And the Simba people entered into the fort, arrested the white men who were then in the fort, and the governor was taken far away. He was beaten and was made to walk back to the fort. How could he walk back barefooted? He went in, not quite a time, he died. So the British from James Fort and those from Cape Coast joined, came to the Windy Bay and bombarded the fort down, including the whole township. Who was at fault? Could you say the people of Simba or the British who were then, selling or ruling over the territory? So this helped the British to say that this situation shouldn't happen again, and that the people of the land must be cowed this time to obey what they, the Europeans, would bring. Don't forget, they were buying slaves from us. Now, we have to obey them by what rules they introduced. And this situation was well developed somewhere in the 1830s.
Doc, please, it's getting very interesting. Okay. If we don't take time, you really want to educate us. The people of Winneba who are watching, some will easily understand you. Some whose forefathers or grandparents are not oblivious to this story will also have doubts. But then before we move on, I want to ask, how was policing organized during the colonial era? And in what way would you say it functioned to secure colonial authority rather than local community welfare?
But when we talk of policing, it's on two phases. We have the traditional policing, and then we have the colonial masters. They are also policing. They are
traditional before the colonial masters introduced their ways.
So when we say traditional policing, here the chief is the leader. Under him, we have the Ebua Nson, their head. Yes, so the head of the seven stools. The seven stools were the counselors who aid the chief. Ebua Inson among the Ga people and the Dami, they say Apashon. But it is not Apashon, it's Ebua Inson. Yes. And the Ebua Inson has been corrupted to be Apashon. Under the Ebua Inson, the head of it.
So from the chief,
to
the head of the one song.
Yes. And then below the Ebua Inson, we have the Siripi. The Siripi for the accounts, the funds especially, then when you come to the Gandhi, they say shipi. That is Siripi. And then shipi. Below the Siripi or the shipi, we have the Safu and the Gandhi say Asafuache. So the Asafuache men were under the city or the ship. Yes. And then below the Asafuache or the Safuene, then we have the townsfolk. This was how it was. That's right. So if someone does something among the community folks and they saw this to be against the ruling standards of the day, the Asafuache or the Safuhenes are sent out among the people to be able to identify the wrongdoer and then bring him to the Sripi or the Shipi so that he can be arraigned before a traditional court, which is always held at the premises of the chief, so that whatever happened, if it was against the people or the person has been wronged, they can sit to arbitrate and then come out with whatever punishment they have. Punishments here are of three phases. One can be offended, and so if he has been offended, the wrongdoer is made to try to, we say, appease. Yes. Try to, settle this very matter with the one he has wronged peacefully. Then the next stage is also being that the one who has committed the fault or the offense can be made either to pay to free himself. And if he cannot free himself, he is made to be put under two conditions. Either he can be sold as a slave or can be made to work. Yes, until he pays to free himself. Now the third one is that if you have committed any offense that demands, okay, let's take it murder cases. If you have murdered somebody, then you also have to be murdered. If you run away from this very child, then any member of your family that you have left behind would have to pay the price to satisfy, the offenders. So these were the punishment. Now, murder cases, punishment was with beheading. You kill somebody, you are also called, they will behead you. And so, when you come to the God-speaking people, they borrowed a word from the Akan. And the areas where people were beheaded was called Mujawe. Mujawe. And so the Mujawe, you could have one in Damashi, come to Usu, it is there, and it transcends all through the coastal lands. Yes. The same is also with the Fantis. We shouldn't forget that the Europeans first settled along the coastal stretch of land. So whatever they did for the people or with the people first started from the coast. coastal stretch of the land. So these were some of the things. But there were some cases that the Europeans could not handle, which they described as witchcraft. They couldn't handle those cases. And so when a case was, referred to them, or they entered into cases like search, which they described as witchcraft, we in Ghana would say aye sani, or cases that have something to do with cursing or spiritual, those cases they cannot handle. They try to enter, but they cannot handle. And so what they do is that they will refer such cases back to the chiefs of the land to see how best they can use their divine practices to handle such cases. But in all, there will be a wrongdoer, and there can be somebody who has to be taken as clean. Divine cases demands that the chiefs or the elders of the town has to demand something as punishment, or they will have to invoke their deities to give the punishment to the wrongdoers. And this was where the Europeans didn't understand. How can you invoke a divine spirit to punish somebody? But it is easily done among the Africans.
And Africans at that time were very strict, were very disciplined, because nobody would want to get a wrath of a deity.
Sure. They were strict, they were fair, and they were fair. That was the African. No favoritism. If you are wrong, you are wrong.
Despite the social status.
No matter what you believe in, if you are wrong, you are wrong. They will invoke their divine spirit. Because before the case is settled, you will have to curse yourself. That what I'm going to say, if it is true, may the divine spirit judge me. And what I'm going to say, if it is false, still, may the divine spirit curse me. And so if you go say this, which is rather the opposite of what is happening in the European style of court systems, they give you a Bible. And when you say things that are of falsehood, the Bible cannot do anything to you in the court. You hold the same Bible, if you speak and what you said is truth, the Bible still can do nothing to you. Sometimes they bring Quran and they bring the cross. But President Jerry John Rawlings said something. He said, it would have been his wish that whoever should be taken to any of the parliaments in Africa, those that feel they are okay to go to parliament or be given ministerial positions, should all be taken to Ambozume or Kliko, so that they all swear there that when I take Ghana's property or money,
I involve myself in corruption.
I must die. And this brought a whole issue in
Because the deities will not tolerate.
So this is where we are at the moment. But even me, to my wish, we should all go swear by the shrine.
We'll be guided.
And that will be the best of counseling for anybody who should take political appointment. Rawlings said better. So this was how the situation used to be. That the policing.
That's how it was
before the Europeans came to. The Europeans came. And when they came, they started by saying they would build a police station so that cases in the communities, because they wanted to avoid the presence of the deities and the curses and the sudden deaths that could occur, they would want to control. And if you want to control, you the one who want to control such cases, you are afraid of the African system. Because if the European who were also raping our women, the European who were catching people and selling them, the European who could sell any product at his own price, and cheat the African. They knew the African has ways and means of, guarding against such things. They were afraid. So they brought in what they call police system.
Okay, so then we'll come to that. So the police force was established then.
Yes.
So it was a police force. The Europeans established the police force and later transitioned to become the police service. What was its original mandate under the colonial administration?
The mandate of the police was to arrest culprits. The mandate again was to bring sanity into the system. The mandate of the police then was to make sure the African obeys the colonial master. And such things that they brought into the main disturbed the African. But the African has been made to obey the European and to see the European more as supreme, or as a god. So the African had nothing to say. And it got into a time in the 1830s where a supposed governor for the British by name Captain George Maclean. Captain George Maclean was to have become the governor of the Gold Coast. But he was appointed by the traders along the coast. He wasn't appointed from by the British from UK or from London. He was appointed by the traders along the coast. So they who were from home did not take him to be a governor. So they brought, George Maclean brought an idea of traveling to various towns and cities by then to arbitrate cases, right the wrongs, and then bring punishment to the wrongdoers. This was what he was doing. Then he was described as a judicial assessor. He was doing this and was able to get some people he described as criminals and brought them from the hinterland to the coast. He had no prison that he has built, but such personalities that he brought down were housed in some of the forts and castles for a while before they were released. And this was also a way of starting a prison, service to aid the government by then. So the wrongdoers knew when they do the wrong thing, they could be taken into any of the forts and castles, locked up there for a while before they were let out. This also brought in a form of sanity. So people began to fear that should they do the wrong thing, they could be taken out,
kept in these forts,
kept in the forts for a while and be let out. So George Maclean was doing these, and it helped. That was in the 1930s. But before the 1930s, we shouldn't forget that when we say that Europeans came onto the coast, it wasn't only the British, but we had the Danes from Denmark. They controlled from Osu, the Christiansborg Castle. They had Fort Augustaberg at Teschen. They left there and crossed over Nungwa, because Nungwa did not accept the Europeans to settle inside Nungwa. So they crossed over Nungwa, Tema, and then entered into Ningo and built a bigger fort over there. Then from Ningo, they entered into Adan and then built another fort over there. These were the forts of the Danes. Now, when you come to what we call today Central Accra, by then the Dutch were there. They came from Holland. They built a fort they called forts. Krevko. Fort Krevko. They were from Holland.
The Netherlands.
Yes, the Netherlands. And then next to Fort Krevko, the British also built the James Fort. Good. Later, Fort Krevko would be sold by the Dutch from Holland to the British. And the first governor of the British to enter into Fort Crèvecoeur was called Usher.
Okay.
So the change of
Of
name,
name.
Fort Crèvecoeur, was given by
Named
the
after
name of the new governor who had come
entered,
in there.
Usher.
And the name Usher Fort
Fort.
of Usher Fort has persisted up to
Up to
today.
date.
All these forts by the Europeans were for trading purposes and were also for administrative purposes. So the community that could build itself around any of the forts saw the European who was occupying the fort as their lord and king. And so what laws the European could bring out must be used by the local people. And this was a strategy that the British later, because they gained access to almost all the forts and castles on the coast, the British gained complete control. And they introduced something they described as, have I forgotten? They want the African to take whatever rule the Europeans bring. And then the Europeans will sit aback and then see the African interpreting what has been given to them over their people. And it was called indirect rule. Indirect rule. The European has, let's take it, the law.
Sure.
They didn't speak the language of the African. So they will call the leadership of the Africans, introduce these kind of rules to the Africans,
make them understand,
and then yes, make them understand, and then the African leadership will take it to the communities, whether it was good or it was bad.
Okay, no, so on this note, still staying with Captain McLean's judicial assessment that he was doing in the interland and bringing people to book, what were some of the offenses that he most aggressively or seriously prosecuted?
Some of the cases were about
labor control, protection of colonial economic activities, because at that time they were all trading.
They were all trained.
So definitely the most serious offenses may be
most serious offenses around economically, people were duping, they were duping each other. Because it is buy and sell. So
duping among traders didn't start from today.
Oh, duping, it was something people say ordained by God. So they were duping each other, you know. And by then there wasn't any good, you know, road networks. So if someone dupes you, he runs away to another town. And if you are able to, know where he is, then that Safuache man, could be sent out to trace and then bring him to book. This was how. So duping, that was economic offenses. And then there were something we call panyari. Panyari. The panyari, P-A-N. Then you add Y, E, R, then you add I-N. Panyari. Yes. Panyari, if I owe you and I cannot pay, you must accept a child of mine to come and stay with you and work for you. I don't know what kind of work you might get to, but the longer my child stays, the lesser might be that I have to pay lessons. This was Panyari. And most ladies were taken into Panyari. And at the end of the day, they got married to the family that they went in to sell.
It's more or less trading something.
So free marriage. No bride price. No bride price. So Panyari was also there. But some of the people got into Panyari, and those that got hold of them would refuse letting their children go back to the families that brought them. So this kind of case can also be before Captain George McLean. Then there were rape cases, a lot of them. A lot of the cases there were of rape nature. But in such cases, the one who had raped the woman could easily come out because he was at fault to say that I will marry her. What would you do? sometimes they have already impregnated, the ladies. What would you do? But justice must find its face. So McLean faced a lot of things. Then McLean also had his fear among the people, because townships could easily be incited against each other and they would fight. So when a war situation could arise, he had the experience of meeting the two sides, calming down situations to let peace prevail. So these were some of the things that he did in the 1830s. The Danes, because they wanted to protect their territories, built a little place they call police station. The first place they called police station was at Pram Pram, and it was built in 1814 by the Danes. So, police station at Pram Pram, Captain George McLean, even though he was British, the British also had a little fort in the same Pram Pram, just next to the police station of the Danes. So because the British had that fort, they called Fort Vernon. Fort Vernon. He could go to Pram Pram because a lot of people have heard of how he could handle cases. So he could go to stay in Fort Vernon and then try the supposedly criminals that the Danes were holding in their police station, and then try them. Then where they could be taken to, that one is left with the Danes over there. So he was traveling from one place to the other, and actually it brought sanity in a way among the local people. So from 1814 coming down into the 1830s, Captain George McLean's time, McLean had to be changed by the British government this time, because he was appointed by the traders.
So he wasn't recognized.
He wasn't recognized by the British system. So the British brought somebody to come and change Captain George McLean. And the one that was brought down to change Captain George McLean was called Commander Stephen Hill. Commander Stephen Hill. He was then popularly known as Commander Hill. When Commander Hill arrived, by then the Ashantis were not they were disturbing. The Ashantis were also eager to expand their territories. Okay? And so how could the Ashantis be kept from expanding?
So that was more trouble waiting for Commander Hill.
More trouble waiting for Commander Hill also. So the Fantis organized their townships along the coast. They extended this idea to those of the Ahanta, that is Takoradi, and then even going into the Zima, and they formed what they call the Fanti Confederation. So the Fantis, because the Ashantis were disturbing them, formed the Fanti Confederation so that they could collaborate with the British and bring among them protection, because if this town is attacked, it will be connected to another town. So if one is attacked, then all the federation have been attacked. This was how they were able to protect themselves. So Commander Hill tried to bring various reforms, and bringing the various reforms got into a point where the Africans saw the real life of the European, and they started opposing the European, and the European would also have to force and bring stronger to hold the ground. Why have I brought in this? I've brought in this to make viewers or listeners to me today to understand that Commander Hill signed an agreement with the coastal tribal groupings. And this agreement was signed on the 6th of March, 1844.
Bond of 1844.
That was called the Bond of 1844. It was signed on the 6th of March, 1844. The whole idea behind the signing of the Bond of 1844 was that the British would rule the Gold Coast for 100 years. And that after 100 years, the British will hand over the Gold Coast to the indigenous people of the land to control. Because they made the indigenous people that signed the agreement with them that within the 100 years space of time, they will train the African to know how to read and write, that is education, bring them health services training, will also make them to know about governance. But we were governing ourselves before they came, but they said they would give us governance training, and again, teach us about protection, and then make us to know about how to experience justice where cases of criminality had come into being. And then we will be even more Christian because they were handing over after 100 years. So 1844, 100 years, where would you arrive at? You are coming to 1944. 100 years. Come 1944, the Second World War was in progress. So there the British could not hand over. 1945, the Second World War came to an end. But 1946, 1947, 1948, they were still not handing over. And again, some of the Gold Coasters, the Africans, were even taken to some countries to fight for their European masters. Let me limit myself to the Gold Coast. Our grandfathers or fathers were taken. They were first camped at Kano. Then from Kano, they were shipped down to the southern portions of present-day Nigeria. And some were taken to, East Africa, and then some to India, and some were taken to Burma, and others the Philippines. Have you heard about Gondabaras? Gonda is a whole township in Ethiopia. Some of them were taken there. So in remembrance of them, Gonda. You've heard about Kamina? Kamina Barracks. It was taken from the old Nigeria. Have you heard about a song? That old Samina, that very song was a Congolese lyric. Okay? But it was later. Later when Ghana went into Congo, to help to see the release of Lumumba, that we brought that very song to. But I'm talking beyond the Congo times. So they went to fight a war for the British. This very war, when today we have to sit down to analyze or assess the situation, the Gold Coasters went to fight a foolish war.
No, on this note of a foolish war, we pause for a quick commercial break. The show returns just after the break. Viewers, stay tuned.
From the heart of nature flows purity, carefully captured in every drop of Campus mineral water. At Campus, each bottle and sachet goes through advanced filtration and mineral balancing, ensuring freshness, taste, and safety that meets international standards. From production to packaging, strict hygiene is maintained, guaranteeing that what reaches you is 100% pure and healthy. Rich in essential minerals, Campus Mineral Water keeps your body hydrated, refreshed, and active every moment of the day. Campus Mineral Water, pure refreshment, healthy living.
Welcome back, viewers. You are still watching the show, and I have a seasoned historian, anthropologist, and a senior lecturer with me here on the show. Dr. Reverend Daniel J.C. Ankra. You're welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you.
So during this era, which forms of punishments were used, and what signal did it send to the natives?
The Europeans arrived when the Africans were of themselves. They were ruling themselves, and they had their traditional ruling methods. Methods were even to the height when we talk about punishment, where people were beheaded. They were beheading people. And this style of beheading people became something that the Europeans became alarmed of. Because some of the Europeans, were captured by the Africans, and they were brutally assaulted. A typical example was when a man, a cartographer, who was, drawing maps, or you could take him to be a surveyor, by name George Ekim Ferguson. George Ekim Ferguson was the surveyor, and in the truest fact, he actually designed how the western boundaries of what we call Ghana today was designed with the Ivory Coast. But he was surveying and got into what we call present day Wa. He got into that area, but he was seized by another chieftain by name Samori Toure. Samori Toure's men did not understand how somebody could come into the land and stretching tapes and that kind of stuff. Where are you from? His answer was he was sent by the Europeans to come and survey the land. Then they got to understand that if you survey the land, then you are taking the land too. Some people, this land here was controlled by Samori Toure, and it was his kingdom. So if you were surveying into this very land, you are arrested. You saw how they arrested him, and they killed him. They killed George Ekim first. Before information could come to the coast, they had buried him. Troops were sent, whether to rescue or whether to arrest. The man had been killed, and that was the end of George Ekim Ferguson. Some other people too were also, captured or arrested by Africans like that. So if that could go on, then why couldn't they then design some punishments for these Europeans? It was within this area or times that we are talking about that the Ashanti also came up to say that they were also a kingdom, and that no other power could come into theirs. They also have an area that they control. And this also led into another crisis for the British to solve. So in the year 1873, by then a new governor had come into the Gold Coast, and his name was Sir Garnet Wolseley. Sir Garnet Wolseley. Sir Garnet Wolseley came with the intent that the Ashantis must be pushed back so that trade with the Europeans would well be organized. And if you want to push the Ashantis back, then it means that you have to fight them. And then disarm them. Make them, and then yes, you make them to obey your rule. So Sir Garnet, the local people could not easily pronounce Sir Garnet, but what they were able to come out with was Sagranti. But Sir Garnet, so they were calling Sir Garnet Sagranti. So Sagranti initiated a war between the British and the Ashantis. And the local people described this very situation as Sagranti War. It was started in 1873 and ended 1872. Immediately, the war ended. 1873 to 1874.
74, sure.
Yes.
You mentioned 72 earlier.
Oh, sorry. 1873 and ended 1874.
Oh, yeah.
Sure. And this very war, the British brought in some nationals to come and help them. You know, around this time they were controlling what today we call Nigeria. So they brought in some Hausa to come and support them. We also had the people along the coast.
Interest.
We also joined to fight the Ashantis. The war actually wasn't a frontier war. It wasn't a gang war. It was the British who designed that, and they went to fight. Immediately after the Sagranti War, 1874, now the British decided that the police station system be extended into all the forts and castles along the coast. And so if you could catch somebody and punish by putting the person into a prison or a cell, then there has to be another body that can oversee, you know, the life and the lives of the people that have been put in there. This was how what today we are calling the prison cells, you know, came into recognition. Because you have put a person in cell, who will give him food?
Who is watching that?
You have said it. So there has to be a group of people that can also do it. So they are also going to be under the control of the British.
So they have the police, they're coming to join the prison service. So the prison and police will be one under the British.
So this was how this also was put in place.
That will take me to my next question. How did the introduction of the formal prisons system reshape crime control and social regulation compared to the era we had before the introduction of the prison system?
Now, the era we had before the British arrived was an era of coercion. If you are wrong, you have no other option, maybe to appeal against the judgment. Once they say you are wrong, you are wrong.
Your case will not be this, whether it was a circumstance.
No, you are wrong. You have to be punished. You cannot appeal. Now, by the British bringing in this new system, if a case was handled and they saw the case to be reviewed, they could review. If a case was handled and they saw the case to be taken to a higher appellate, it was allowed. So you could see a change in the way the Africans handled their cases and the new system that the British had also brought. Now, we are looking at a case like, they call it manslaughter. And then they have another murder. The two involved this. But how did the person die? Must properly be looked into.
Whether it was a defense for the other parts or it was a deliberate act to kill or take the person's life.
Sometimes the killing could also come because of self-defense. Because defending yourself can mean anything. You can use all means to defend yourself. So if by defending myself and my attacker dies, I didn't kill him, but he initiated his death and he had it. So you see that some of the cases have to be reviewed. And so the British brought a system that was fine when we look at justice. But still, the British never allowed the African to take them or any member of the Europeans on the coast to court. They didn't allow that. And so the British were like having, an easy way of living because nobody could touch them. The law was for them. And they brought it. And so they put the laws out. And you receiving the law, you don't have power to take the Europeans to any court. Yes, they were bigger than the court. And they were powerful also than the law. So the prison service could oversee the African prisoners in cells or in jail, but they never had any European that was put into jail. A typical example was when Mr. Emery snatched a rifle in 1948 and shot into the crowd of ex-servicemen and killed Sergeant Agiti, Corporal Atiku, and Private Odate Lamte. Nothing was done to Emery, but there was killing. Could that be taken as murder? Could that be taken as manslaughter? Or could that be taken as self-defense? Nothing. Emery was just free. Before the Africans could realize, Emery had been taken out of the Gold Coast and sent back to Britain.
Before he would even possibly be attacked by the Africans.
Who could prosecute him? They said he was defending the government because the soldiers unarmed were coming to present a petition. Who raised anything about that? There were then lawyers. The UGCC were the powerful lawyers who raised a question about that. Rather, a commission was set, a Watson commission, and Watson brought a report in favor of the British. And so there was an outcry that Watson Commission's report was not to be entertained. It needed a better report to be written. So the Kusi, the pronunciation, Kusi Committee was later sent. Kusi was writing his name like a European. Simple Kusi. He was spelling it Coussy. So, if care is not taken, you will pronounce it Kussy Commission. It was Kusi. The name was Kusi. Just like of late, we have one very beautiful lawyer, Mr. Lita. No, Lita. But it's an ever name. It's not Lita. It's Mito.
Same as Chibi issue.
Yes. And we have our beautiful MP, Rollins' daughter. Senator. But it is an ever name. It's Senator. Sometimes such things have to be well explained because people are watching or listening to us.
Sure. So let's move to how the colonial justice system came to restructure the traditional authority and the customary courts.
The colonial authorities looking at the justice system, they blocked the African system of justifying or handling cases. They blocked them. They started with the cancellation of what we call Mujawi. They took that power from the African ruling class. Nobody should kill except they, the British, have organized the killings. What we say, people say Faris Squad. Yeah. But they, the British, would have to say this through the court system that they had brought in there. Okay? But no traditional leader has the power to condemn somebody to death. You don't have that very right. Then again, because they brought in the cell and the jail system, that had to be taken by everybody under whom and under their jurisdiction. So these were some of the changes. And then they also said you could also seek a legal guidance. You can hire a lawyer, you can get somebody to guide you in court cases. These also came in. And such were some of the changes that rather weakened the positions of the chiefs of the land. Now, the chiefs of the land had their powers weakened even more when the Europeans tried to design areas to help in governance, creating districts. They created provinces, not regions, but provinces. And then they also had something they called councils. Such divisions of the traditional areas weakened the powers of the traditional rulers. So you, the traditional ruler, let's take it that you are at Accra. Inside Accra, there were two forts, the James Fort and the Usher Fort. So if you are a chief or a king over there, the Europeans were on top of you. So there was nothing you could do. Yes. So even you, if you tried to do the little mistake, you will be held accountable or responsible for that. So they can even come and arrest you. So if a whole chief could be arrested, what could he do again? So you saw the Europeans bit by bit, usurping the powers of the Africans. And somewhere in 1851 to 1861, they even introduced something they call the poll tax ordinance. What they brought, the poll tax, was that every individual under the British administration should have to pay something to the government. And they said the money to be paid will be gathered and then used for development of the African areas. They are in castles. So they will collect the monies from the Africans and will use the monies to develop the African townships under the forts and castles. So 1851 to 1861, 10 years period. Again, the African had to rise up and said, no, the monies that were being collected, no proper accounting system was there. So that the African will know, okay, this was taken from us and this money has been used to do this kind of development. No developments were coming. And the officers that were also sent out to collect this poll tax, some of them too were corrupt. You know, they weren't truthful. And some problems here and there, the African had to come up. By then, the 100 years period had made them to have some, educationists, some early lawyers, and some have had knowledge about governance. So they also took the matter up and have to tell that the poll tax ordinance should be abolished. So there were people like John Saba, John Mensah Saba, there were the Thompsons and the like. So the British also found it very difficult in some of the areas. But all the same, they will still press on. So if the poll tax ordinance is to be abolished, like the Africans say, now they will bring the poll tax through the court system. So if the court system now talks about the poll tax ordinance, if you say you won't pay, then it goes with the penalty. The police will catch you, then the prison service will also have to oversee your jail term. So these were some of the fears that entered into the communities, and these were also some of the good changes that the European also brought into the system. And today, this is where we are. Whether the British were bad or they were good, they were up to our advancement in life. So we cannot say that the African was so good in all things. The African was also wrong in some areas. We cannot say the European was also bad. At least they gave us 100 years, we were able to learn something.
They also gave us some education.
And they did something for us. But all the same, we needed to have our system of governance under the control of we, the Africans, so that we can have the power to decide, but they should not decide for us. This was something.
So we really enjoyed the history class. I remember dating back to my days in the senior high school, a few days in the history class, I think the very first month, spoke about this, the Sir Granty, we were all thinking it was Sir Granty. But after it was Sir
Garnet
was because of the pronunciation, the difficulty pronouncing it, became Sir Granty. And even I never knew it was the exact day that seemed much that the
1844.
I always remember it was the month of 1844, but I never
knew about
the scene of March, and even for what reasons they were signing the bond that the British were going to rule us for 100 years. And even after 100 years elapsed, they were still not handing over power. So I've also added to my knowledge, and I hope our viewers back home, those who are students of history, those who enjoy history, I really enjoy it, will come back for another episode. So for a final take, overall, in your opinion, how did the colonial criminal justice system contribute to the success or continuity of the colonial labor cost?
We talked about the indirect rule. You know, their justice system. Whenever they found out that the African was rising against some of their policies, then they would give the policies to the kings and chiefs of the land, you know, to handle the situation for them. And so, if the kings fall down, it was not the colonial master that was fault. It was the king. So the people will rise up against their king. But when they saw success, then it was they that had brought the idea for governance. Now, changes came in different modes. But what changes the European brought up, they saw it to be to their advantage. And if it got into their advantage, then they would bring what we call a policy coming through the court systems that they have instituted. And so the courts or the judiciary will be behind the policies that they bring up. And the African did not see how they could jump the European system that they didn't like, because the court was there and they were afraid of the court. And so the court has constituted to what today we have. So the court has helped, and it has curbed waywardness. The courts have helped. It has curbed what we call unrest. You know, we have civilian unrest. And the court again has also helped to let people at least be satisfied if they have cases against themselves or among themselves. And the satisfaction is the true judgments that are given. The problem here is rather that when a judgment was given at the court, the African found it very difficult to appeal against that. But all the same, we have had what today have become teach the people to know that the court is not an evil place, but the court, even though it can punish, the same court can also give you relief. And we have come to where we are right now.
That's very insightful. Doc, we are in the month of March, and as we all know, as Ghanaians, we celebrate the Ghana month. This is your camera. The final words to Ghanaians as a historian and anthropologist.
Well, looking at Ghana and what I see about, we have to have some people celebrating so that our upcoming, personalities that are taking on to age could know that some people actually started the fight. And I must thank you coming from the prison service. I thank you so much for relating to the civilians in this very way. My family was a prison service family. It started from my grandfather, who was called Saki. He was Soko Saki of Jamestown. And then it went into the extended family of the Lobo. We had a cousin who also joined the service called Felis Lobo. Then the later grouping is the Ahia Ababu family. Now Ahia Ababu, the father, I call it of us then, was a tailor, and he was producing your uniforms. And his children also came up, his grandchildren came up. Today we have the immediate two that are going on retirement. Paul Ababu, or Paul Ahia Ababu, and the other Matthew Ahia Ababu, and one young one, Sarah Ababu. She was playing the volley for the service. So when I see a group like this, you have to be celebrated. If awards are given in Ghana, prison officers deserve to be awarded. Then again, we are looking at our traditional leadership. They shouldn't be thrown out when it comes to governance. Now, the libation they pour is a form of prayer. And in the Bible, Numbers chapter 28, verse 6 and 7. Numbers chapter 28, verse 6 and 7. God Almighty told Moses that strong drink, when it is poured onto the ground, gives an aroma that he, God, likes best. But today, our presidents, when they say state functions, they know of Christians, they know of Muslims, and they played the Ulome out of the game. It is not a happy situation among the traditional leadership. Chiefs matter when it comes to votes. Ulome matter when it comes to voting. Fetish priests matter when it comes to voting. So why is it that when it is about governance, we throw them out? Very soon, we'll be organizing the 6th of March, what we talked about. So Kwame Nkrumah chose 6th of March. He could have taken the 1944, but because of the Second World War, they remained and delayed and chose 1957. But the date 6th March prevailed. And what is so we are expecting the government not to look just with celebrating with Christians and Muslims, but they must bring the traditional practitioners also into it. So everyone has to be awarded or accepted. And another thing I'll bring in, if you bring fishermen, right, and you bring farmers, among fishermen there can be one person who excels among them.
Sure.
And if you bring farmers, there could be one that excels among them. I'm expecting an award named after Tete Kwashi, who brought cocoa to Accra.
From Fernand Dupo.
Yeah, he brought it to Accra. Wherever he brought it from, he brought it to Accra. And from Accra, he took it to Akwapim. And from Akwapim, it has spread all over the country. So, Tete Kwashi, when presenting awards, his name must be attached to one of the awards, and thus must be upheld, so that every year his name could be mentioned.
Sure. That brings us to the end of today's episode of Freedom and Heritage Show. My guest has been Dr. Reverend Daniel J.C. Ankra, the administrator for the Bobugulomo, who is the spiritual overlord of the Dame people. The show was brought to you by Campus Mineral Water. Pure, refreshing, simply the best. And if you want to support the Think Prisons 360 Degrees initiative, kindly dial *972 *1*3100# and donate as little as 1 Ghana cedi every month. And if you want to partner or collaborate and do business with the Ghana Prison Service, kindly call on the Prison Industry and Business Limited, Primbas, at the prison's headquarters. Thank you for watching. My name is Superintendent Sam Kofi Opoku. Catch you same time next week.